Obviously, at the start, it's all about 10K, 20K a month. How can I get rich quick? How do I get the Lambo and the watches and all this shit? I can tell you after being there and having experienced it, driven these cars, seen the guys with the watches, living in the penthouse, like whatever, that won't solve your problems. What's going to solve your problems is building cool shit and being fulfilled while you do it and being excited to get up every morning to do that. I don't think that there are any such thing as business problems, there's only personal problems.
Yeah.
Right. So the only reason your business isn't where you want it to be or where you are in life, maybe not with revenue, but with your skills or whatever you set out to do goal-wise, is just because you have limiting beliefs.
Looking back at everything you've done, you know, the wins, the losses, the lessons, if you could leave the audience with one piece of advice that could genuinely change their life or their business, what do you think that would be? All right, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. If you guys are new, my name is Adi, and today we have another guest interview. This one's gonna be a special one. Sitting across from me, I have a guy named Noah Kent. He's an absolute wizard when it comes to sales, systems, and just business in general. Over the past few months, I've gotten to know him pretty well, and with his team, he's actually generated well over $35 million for the businesses they own and operate. So he's been providing a lot of value for me, and I know he's gonna be doing the same for you guys today. So Noah, with that being said, let's take a moment to introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me.
For sure.
You work me up to be a lot more than than I do for myself, but it's a pleasure to be here and happy to break it down with you today.
For sure. Awesome. So give us a bit of an introduction for your backstory. You got started with entrepreneurship at the age of 14, 15. You're currently involved with Dylan Wilson, who I'm sure the viewers have seen. I've had a podcast with him on my channel as well. That's actually how I met Noah. So take us back to those early stages all the way to where you are right now.
Yeah, so I started doing photo and video work. My entrepreneurial career started as a freelancer. It was one-off contracts for restaurants, jiu-jitsu clinics, gyms, dealerships, really whatever I could get my hands on. And I was that kid who would, do his homework the night before, pre-read the syllabus for the next day. And then I would sit in the back of the class on my computer because we were allowed computers in class. And I would just go and send DMs, cold DMs, all class. Everybody looked at me like, what's this kid doing? And I was just lining up free contracts. And those free contracts eventually turned into paid contracts. And I think by the time I was 15, I was charging about $1,500 for a minute of edited video. This is back in like 2016. So, I mean, there wasn't really any going market rate at that time. It was kind of fly by wire for Facebook ads, like the very first few Facebook ads that were being run, some YouTube content here and there, things like that. And it was good. It was good money for a high school student. I got my first car using that money. I also worked part-time at a chicken shack doing counter service. And eventually that evolved into me saying, I don't really know if I can do much more of this on my own. I'd like to hire a team. And that freelancing agency sort of transformed into a full SMMA. We did social media management for dealerships, restaurants as well. So a lot of the old clients we just reached back out to and said, do you want to do this on a recurring basis? We'll create your content schedule, post it on Instagram for you, write the copy, and I'll send you back reports. And at the time it was tough because there wasn't anything like Hyros. So there wasn't any organic attribution. And a lot of the clients started to call us back and said, hey, how are we able to get a visual on what we're returning for the $1,500, $2,500 a month we're spending on your services? And I said, I don't know. And that got us a lot more into ads. And over the following couple of years, we realized that, you could almost print money on ads. We'd spend $1, make back $3, sometimes make back 10 or more. And the higher ticket we went, the better the returns we got. And that's kind of where we've ended up now, scaling a number of companies to those high 6-7 figure run rates, and taking those same systems that we learned to develop ourselves and helping other service-based businesses that do online B2B work implement the same systems with their clients, which is what we do at Catalyst now between myself and Dylan.
Right. Okay. And going back to Octane Collective, which was the agency where you were working with local businesses, essentially all these different types of businesses that you just talked about. I know we talked about this before, especially in the last time we filmed this podcast. For those watching, this is actually round 2. But a big thing that you mentioned is with that agency, you actually partnered up with your dad and you ended up working with him to grow his business, Nomad Microhomes. So tell us a bit more about that journey and how that really influenced what you guys do at Catalyst as well, and how that really started that partnership with you and Dylan.
For sure. Yeah, I was actually working on a video this morning talking about bottlenecks. And one of the bottlenecks that we faced in Octane as a SMMA was that we were in a highly commoditized industry. I was competing against every 16 to 28-year-old woman and every other dude who's trying to make money online, because that's all people knew how to do, retainer-based services. And so margins were slim. They're like 30, 15%. It was super hard work. And instead of working for no employer, which is why I got into entrepreneurship in the first place, I ended up working for 9. And right, every one of my clients was a new employer. They're expecting full-time work.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And so I knew that if I wanted to really achieve what I'd set out to do, which was obviously at the start, like everybody, become financially free, retire parents, all these things, I would have to hit those 50, 100K months. And just doing the math on paper, I'm like, oh man, I have to have like 20 to 50 clients to do that. I can't even imagine what it would be like to have 10, let alone 20 to 50. And so in sort of a moment of panic and anxiety, I fired all of our clients. We had, I think, 5 on retainer and a few one-off projects every month. So we were pushing like 10, 15K a month at the time. And we took the thing back to zero. And my dad, who I'd been watching build his company for the last 10 years, like ever since I was a kid, early teenager, he had been struggling to get his product out the door. He had this great product. It was a modular tiny home. You can find it online, nomadmicrohomes.com. And they just didn't really have a way to get it in the hands of people that needed it. So I said, why don't we just start running ads for you? We charged a setup fee, $5,000. And I'm like, damn, that's 2 months retainers right up front. And it wasn't a problem. Their investors were like, this is perfect. Let's make it happen. We got a $1,500 a month approval for spend for the first 3 months. Month 1, we spent $1,500. We brought back 1 sale, which is about 75,000 Canadian. Obviously, not all of the cash was collected up front. It was sort of a deposit basis, but that was 15K in for the company on $1,500 in spend, so 1 to 10. And that was using a sales rep that we had trained off the street. He had no prior high ticket sales experience. He's just a realtor I met at a cigar lounge here in Vancouver. Month 2, we rolled back we rolled back all the money that we were supposed to be paid from that sale on commission. So we had a 20% performance fee.
Oh, wow.
So we took our 5K some odd, rolled it back into ads and closed 3 units. And the month after that, we did the same thing. And by month 3 or 4, we were spending $30,000 on ads. And the month after that, we spent $70,000 on ads. And as a Canadian company, that's a lot if you're spending US dollars.
Yeah.
And we were really pushing. And what was once a company that was doing 1 or 2 sales a month was now doing, 5 to 10 sales, sometimes 12 plus a month with multiple units. And so that was us changing our business model and removing that bottleneck once and for all, but at the same time having a really great opportunity to work with your father, which most people don't have that opportunity. And now that company is actually a portfolio company here at Catalyst. And we've sort of shifted focus from working with customers on one-off backyard projects to much more business to government, business to business deals with hundreds, if not thousands of units, because the returns for the time are much greater. But
exactly, yeah.
I hope that answers your question.
No, for sure. And it's interesting because ever since then, you got partnered with Dylan, and now, as you mentioned, Catalyst, you guys have portfolio companies, and you're also helping all sorts of different types of businesses. So somebody listening to this, let's say they haven't seen any of Dylan's videos, they haven't read any of Hormozi's books, don't know what a marketing HoldCo is. Describe a little bit more about that agency, how you guys operate, what you guys do.
Yeah, for sure. So we kind of realized after doing this with my father's company that, you build up this equity enterprise value into a business, and overnight their investors can call them and say, hey, look, I know we're paying $50,000, $80,000 a month to this agency, and they're doing good work, bringing in a couple $100,000, maybe even $1 million a month in deals, but why don't we do this on our own? Like, we can cut some serious costs. And so I had to sit down with my dad one day, and he was like, hey, listen, the investors are calling us saying you're doing great work, but we want to bring this in-house. And I said, well, why don't we become the in-house agency? Right? And so we actually invested about $320,000 into my dad's business through ads.
Wow.
Right? By rolling back our own fees for the first few months, and then actually on top of that, some of my own personal money back into the business. And we became a partner at that company. And what we realized is, like, if we keep doing this, right, if we can have the true value of an agency being a business scaling machine, which is what it is, and instead of ever looking to exit your golden goose, you get to continue to produce these golden eggs, i.e. case studies like Nomad, case studies like you and some of the other guys we have in our program. And instead of just having them run away with everything we built with them, which is great if they want to do that, but if they'd rather work with us on a deeper level for long term, we can start not only building value to these companies, but retaining value at Catalyst from the work we've put in, and then eventually in the future provide a bunch of mini exits. Because the coolest thing about it is, from a roll-up perspective, if I took 15 different agencies, right, all doing about $1 million EBITDA, I could probably individually exit each one for 1.5 to 3x multiple, depending on the year, market, whatever.
Yeah.
But if I roll them all up, now I have $15 million in EBITDA, right? And so even if we have more than 15 agencies, I can call you up and say, hey, we're selling 15, and instead of a 3x multiple or a 1.5x multiple, which is what you get on your own, if you want to sell 25% of your company right now, right, I can throw you into this roll up, and all of a sudden you can get a 4x or a 5x multiple.
Right.
So not only does it allow us to have these mini exits and retirements throughout our entire career, but it allows our companies, our portfolio companies, to do the same thing. And that's really the beauty of this is over the long term, you have a much more sustainable business that you can actually see compounding and growth and enterprise value, which is where 85% of the richest men in the world and richest women in the world have their net worth.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's insane. One thing just on that, I know you guys, the way you guys talk about ad spend is so different too. I remember one time me and you were having a conversation about stocks, I think on one of these calls. And you were like, no, fuck that. I would never invest in, let's say, just some random stocks. I'd rather just put that into ad spend. And another thing that you guys said is like the difference between you and your competitors is just who puts in more ad spend, right? The person, let's say whether it's Charlie Morgan or whoever, all these guys running these agency courses, whoever ends up putting the most in ad spend is the one that just beats their competitors and just pushes them out of the market. So talk a bit more about your mentality in that sense.
Yeah, I think we're having a conversation with a guy who runs a good portion of Grant Cardone's media accounts, right? Yeah. So he spends a significant amount of money every day. And I said, what's the biggest problem you typically see with people who are trying to optimize their own accounts? And he's like, people optimize for a pretty ad account and not a pretty business. And so I sat there and I'm like, what does that actually mean? And I came to realize that, you can have an ad account that returns 3x and say that I'm going to set my scaling benchmark at 3x return on spend. But what you're not paying attention to is what's your profit margin on that, right? So contribution margin if you're e-com, or EBITDA, or whatever, net margin if you're in service-based business, right? Lifetime gross profit to CAC is probably a better way to look at it. But instead of optimizing it at 3x ROAS, why not just optimize for making your business more money? Because that's what we're here for at the end of the day, right? So he's like, even though you're not returning 3x, maybe you return a 1.5, but you're still profiting an extra $50,000 a month. Is that not allowing your business to take that next step forward? I'm like, well, theoretically it could be, but the margins of the business are smaller, right? He's like, who cares if the margins are smaller? You still have more EBITDA. It's like, fair enough, right? And then there's one more step to that argument, which is like, the person who spends the most is the one who determines how much the market's willing to spend, right? Because it's a bidding system, right? So if I'm willing to spend $5,000 to get a qualified call, which is completely unrealistic in most situations, that means that if somebody else wants to even reach my scale, they'd have to be willing to spend that amount at least, if not more. And so once you're spending the most and you have a way to make it work, the market is determined by what you're willing to pay.
Yeah.
Right. So that escape velocity is super important. And as long as you're not in that top 5-10% of spend within your own industry and your market, you're really at the mercy of the people who are. So for us, we realized that most businesses' biggest bottleneck and constraint between 100,000 and $1 million a month is just they're just not spending enough money. Right. So it hurts. Like there's a lot more risk when you start seeing those $200,000, $100,000 Amex bills at the end of each month. You're like, damn, I used to try and make that in a year, and now I have that on my bill every month. Like, what the fuck's going on? But that's just what it takes.
Yeah. No, fair enough. That makes sense. And talking about the long term with Catalyst, I want to understand what your guys' vision is over the next 5, 10, 30, 50 years.
For us, it's quite simple. I'll kind of go back to a story that Dylan told me when we were first figuring out our vision, and it's that he was super close with his grandparents growing up. And we were kind of sitting in my living room or his living room being like, we have all these team members, we got all these expenses. Like we could just so easily run an info product on a nice, warm, organic audience and come home with more profit than we're making right now with a fraction of the work. Like, why are we even doing this? Right. And I was like, man, I just love building cool shit. Yeah. And I don't think that I'd be satisfied. Like I would just be like, what the hell's going on? Yeah. I'd be anxious all day. And he's like, yeah, man, like I used to sit in my grandma's living room and I would just build Lego for hours. And I would be so proud of that Lego. I got like pictures in picture albums of me just sitting beside my finished projects. I said, well, that's awesome. And he said, what would it take to get back to that feeling of freedom? Just like building cool shit. And like, really, that's what money is for. But one step further than that, the way that you have to facilitate that freedom for yourself is one with money, but two with systems, right? Because you can go do that info product. And the reason why it's scalable is because, well, you don't have to do anything. You just deliver one to many and there's no fulfillment. It's like 90% margin other than what you're posting for content and ads, if you're even running ads. Then you take that next step and it's like, okay, well, to push past my organic ceiling of $50,000, $100,000 a month, or depending how big your audience is and how potent it is, then I'm going to have to go and build a business. Like now we're doing a lot more done for you stuff. That's what the market really wants, more value, right? Maybe we start doing investments and things like that. We have team members all of a sudden. And now you're in the trenches, you're doing people management. Like that's one of your biggest bottlenecks at that point. And as you start to work more and more value into it because you're trying to achieve greater and greater targets, you lose sight of why you started in the first place, which is just to build cool shit and facilitate that freedom. So Catalyst's mission is just to facilitate the freedom to build by building and proving systems.
Right.
And we prove those systems in our own business first, and then we help others implement them into theirs once we know they work.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. It's very cool. Build cool shit. Love
Yeah.
it. That's awesome. And talking about just business in general, I do ask this question to all of my guests that come on majority of the time. Nowadays, there's a bunch of people that are going to be watching this that don't have any sort of business. They're trying to get started with something, whether they're looking at SMMA, school communities, growth operating, high ticket sales. There's so many business models. I'm sure there's going to be a new one this year. What would you say to that one person? Should they get started with one of these or do something else?
I would say pay attention to what you want and question whether it's something that you want or something that somebody else has told you that you want. Because there is no golden ticket, no golden key to the castle when it comes to the business that will be your be all end all for your life, right? Like you're probably going to have multiple businesses. You're probably going to fail at every single one until the last business. And who even knows when the last business is, right? And all these vehicles, whether you are working, a 9-to-5 job or you're working at a consulting firm, you start your own business, you're doing a freelance, whatever you're doing, you're going to make it. It just depends on what aligns with your fulfillment, right? So ask yourself the question of like, what do I actually want to get out of this when all is said and done? What's the purpose of building this all? The same way that Dylan and I did when we were at that $100,000 range, trying to figure out what the next step is, right? And figure out what the gift that you're here to share with the world is. Maybe you don't actually know that yet. And that'll probably help you figure things out. And that will help you align with the business that you want to build. Obviously at the start, it's all about 10K, 20K a month. How can I get rich quick? How do I get the Lambo and the watches and all this shit? I can tell you after being there and having experienced it, driven these cars, seen the guys with the watches, living in the penthouse, like whatever, that won't solve your problems. What's going to solve your problems is building cool shit and being fulfilled while you do it and being excited to get up every morning to do that. Because once you get to that destination, right, that you set, whatever that is materialistically, you're probably going to realize that you've never felt more unfulfilled. So do the business that speaks to you most and just lean into the things that challenge you and that you enjoy doing every day. And whatever else comes from that, whatever your definition of success is outside of fulfillment, enjoy it as it comes and be okay if it leaves as well.
Right. Talking a bit more about fulfillment there. I know you talked about, for you guys figuring out the whole process of building cool shit. For you, like, what is it really that fulfills you? Would you say, I guess you just kind of answered that too. It's not going to be the money, the cars, you've experienced all that. It just goes back to, certain things. So speak a bit more about that fulfillment thing and how that applies directly to you.
Yeah, I've got a little journal that I look at every morning, and really what it says is my purpose with what I do, the businesses I build and the money that I make, these are my vehicles and my vessels to make change, right? Because I think at some point, and we talked about this the other day, things change from motivating yourself to work and needing to motivate yourself to work because everything in your life will change if you do, right? Being your environment and your lifestyle and your family, to being motivated to work, not needing, being motivated to work because nothing will change if you don't. Right. And so for me, I look at the businesses we build, and the people that we work with and the people that we help as a vessel to do that. And at the end of the day, there really isn't any purpose on this in this life other than to enjoy it,
Yeah.
right? And ideally, you leave the world in a better place than when you first stumbled upon it. And to me, that just looks like, how many lives can you positively impact? How many lives can you positively change, right? You can take it to the furthest level of being a guy like Elon Musk and saying, I'm going to save the human race by being interplanetary and all these things. But at the end of the day, he's just trying to help as many people as possible.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'd love to be able to directly attributed, change a billion lives before I say bye-bye to this experience here. And that's what drives me every day. I just get to stack those lives that you change, and every day there becomes more and more and more. Like, we have 75 active partners here at Catalyst. You're one of them. And a lot of them will call us back after we've worked with them, or even while we're working with them, and saying, hey, thank you for closing me. You fucking changed my life. You're welcome.
Yeah.
And same thing with the team members that work inside your company, and ideally the other people in your life that have nothing to do with your business. Like being able to pay your parents' mortgage, like sending them $15,000. That's what I did for Christmas. Paid for their mortgage for that month. Fucking expensive mortgage, if you ask me. That's the cost of running a business for 10 years without getting any sales. But we're working at that.
Yeah.
But like, how many lives can you change? That's really what drives me and what drives Dylan. Yeah.
I love it. That's a really great answer. And, talking about these businesses that you guys scale as well, you guys have experience taking businesses from almost doing nothing to significant revenue numbers, 20, 50, 100K per month plus. So I want to understand, like, what would you say, looking at all these businesses, what are some things that they do that kind of allow for that success? And what also differentiates those different businesses at those different revenue points?
Right. I'll answer the second question first, and then I'll get to the first one because it's a much more personal answer.
Yeah.
But from 0 to 50K, it's more the same, right? It's like, are you the right person? Do you have just the consistency and discipline to put the inputs in that are required to get those outputs? And like, transparently, it's not that much work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work if you're not willing to take a leap, right? What I mean by that is you can do 1 million cold calls a day, you can send 1 million emails a day, but if you're not willing to put your rep on the line and offer something that the market needs to provide real value, well, you're probably not going to get anything out of it.
Yeah.
Right. But if you do have the right offer, if you're willing to put yourself on the line to make a difference and actually change somebody's life, or if you want to do something that big, you have to actually risk a little bit. It's not that much work. Right? Like, my girlfriend the other day was like, I want to get a couple of freelance clients. Okay, cool. What are you afraid of? Well, I'm afraid of not being able to fulfill for them. I'm like, okay, we'll offer for free. Okay. How do you feel now? Well, I don't know if it's going to be worth my time. Exactly. So you got to charge some money, right? Well, what are you going to offer them? Copywriting services. Okay. But what is that actually going to do for their business? What does the business get out as a return? You hear us asking this question all the time. And all it took was her one day. It was weeks of her thinking and agonizing over this, but all it took was her one day just sending 10 emails. And she gets a response. Woman's like, I need help with my ads, my website, everything, my social media. And she's like, oh my God, that was so easy. And I'm like, yeah, now imagine if you did that for 6 months, you'd probably be at that 30, 40, 50K a month. And the difference between somebody who is and isn't after putting those inputs in and having the willingness to put themselves out there and risk their reputation to change somebody's life is just how much do you value your own time? And that time is different for everybody, right? Because some people will start and they just, no matter what they do, no matter what they provide to a business, they are not willing to accept that their time is probably worth a lot more than what they're charging. And the people that make it there faster are just much more set and confident in themselves. And they're just like, listen, my time is worth $1 million a minute and I'm not even charging close to that, but this will do for now. So if you can figure that out, the faster you can figure that out and wrap your head around that, the faster you get to that 50K a month. Now from 50K to 100K, depending on, if you're working with one client on a massive performance deal, which usually won't work out. Let's say you're building a sustainable service business. That's when you're going to have to start looking at hiring people, offloading and scaling horizontally in your business so that you can focus on growing as opposed to delivering, right? This is when you start hiring setters and sales reps and service delivery team members and specialists. And at that point, it still is more of the same, right? You're just doing more of what you were doing, but now it becomes more about how can you help other people do what you do equally as good, if not better. So when you do this, what we've seen is you'll get stuck between 50 and 100, or maybe even 50 to 150, because you cut corners on saying, okay, I'm just gonna like spend all my time building the system, but I'm gonna spend a little bit less on my talent because I, worked so hard on my system. But yeah, you can have a great system, but at the end of the day, if the talent isn't perfect, right, you want them to be better than you,
Yeah.
it's not going to make a difference. And so don't cut your corners on the talent, pay extra. It's okay if you eat margin in the short term, because you'll make more in the long term for it. Now, the first question you asked is, what are the biggest patterns and trends you see that prevent people from doing these in the first place, like even 6 figures plus?
Yeah.
I don't think that there are any such thing as business problems. There's only personal problems.
Yeah.
Right. So the only reason your business isn't where you want it to be, or where you are in life, maybe not with revenue, but with your skills or whatever you set out to do goal wise, is just because you have limiting beliefs. The reason why I couldn't get from $15K a month to $50,000 with one client every month was because I didn't believe that it was even possible to charge that. I didn't believe that there were offers out there that allowed you to do that. And the second that I said, you know what, that's probably not true, and opened my mind to that possibility, well, 3 months later, look at what we were doing, 50K a month.
Yeah.
So I hope that answered your question in a long-winded way.
It definitely does. And that's another thing I want to touch on, because what you just said, there's no such thing as business problems. It's just personal problems.
Right.
That's one of the biggest things I think that I learned from you as well. Just, as soon as we kind of got involved and started talking, and I started learning from you guys, one of the things that I struggled with was frame on these sales calls. And, I brought this up before, but I always kind of had that scarce and needy mindset where I'm like, fuck, I need this sale so bad. I need this guy's money. He's got to pay me. We got to get him on, whatever it takes, that type of thing. And immediately, like, when you hop on a sales call with that mindset, it's such a different dynamic. Like, you just kind of, that person could just tell what you're about. And that was one of the things when I started hearing you talk, you're like, hey, why even have that frame, right? Like, you need to kind of understand what you're worth, understand, the value that you actually provide. And that was a big game changer. Second thing was how we actually interact with these different business owners. A lot of these guys in the SMMA business world, when we're working with local businesses, a lot of the people are going to be a lot older. And that dynamic is instantly like, this guy knows so much more than me. Who am I to, tell him what to do? And that's one of the things that you really helped with as well. Just, having that mindset, frame, everything. So speak a bit more about that, because I know there's going to be a lot of people listening that are also going to be struggling with that too.
Yeah, that's reference to last week's call with Evan, right?
Yeah.
We have these like regular inner circle calls. Dylan and I will basically open up and answer any questions that people have. And there's this group of, I think it's 3 brothers and a friend, or 2 brothers and a friend, something like that. When they first started with us, they were all working at car dealerships and as engineers, and now they've all quit their jobs and they're working full-time on their agency. And they work with blue-collar workers, like home improvement niche, these kinds of things. And Evan came to me on one of these calls and he said, I'm struggling holding frame with these workers because, they're like the hootin' tootin' kind of, yeah, I know best. Who are you to tell me what to do? Kind of business owners, right? Blue collar. And I'm on there trying to challenge them about their beliefs when it comes to marketing and our services, and I just can't hold frame for the life of me. And the simple question to him that changed everything was, have they ever run an ad account before? Right? No. Okay. And have they ever returned more than $1 for every dollar they spend on ads? No. Right. What's the best return they've ever gotten on investment, do you think? Well, I don't know. Well, I mean, if you look at the market, the average return on one of the most successful indexes ever, Vanguard's index, total stock index, was like 12% a year over the last decade and 10% over the last 30, 40 years, right? And so who are they to tell you with a skill set to run an ad account and return $3 for every dollar you spend, which is infinitely more than the best performing index on the market, right? Every month, that you don't have the right to question them and their beliefs.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, fuck. Right? So that's a problem that a lot of us struggle with. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, if you're selling services or products, it's just, we put our customers on these pedestals in terms of what they know. But remember, everybody's talking to you because they want to buy something. They want you to say the right things to convince them to make this happen, because they're looking for a solution to their problems. They're looking to improve their life. And if you know you can do that, well, you do them a disservice if you don't challenge their beliefs, right?
100%, that's very true. And then talking about hiring, because I know hiring is a big thing. You consistently speak on it, whether it's bringing on setters, closers, whatever it is within an agency. So speak a bit more about hiring. When should somebody start thinking about hiring? I know that's one of those daunting tasks that generally, come up, especially for me at that kind of 20-ish range per month. That's something I have to start thinking about soon too. So speak a bit more about hiring. When should people start thinking about it?
Yeah, we have our own little sort of 4-step framework for this, but it's based on Elon's framework, which is make the requirements less dumb and then remove process steps. But you should also be adding process steps at this point, right? And then once you've done that, then you can automate and delegate. Right? For us, it's something quite similar, right? Which is do the unscalable first. So for you, for example, right, we were talking the other day about should I hire setters? Should I hire them as VAs or North American? I'm like, or even AI. And I said, no, why don't you just try doing it yourself? How many clients can you handle on your own? And you'll very quickly break your belief on what's actually possible in terms of delivering great service at scale, affordably. And this is something you want to do across the entire board. So like if you're looking to hire a closer or a setter, close 20 calls yourself and make sure you close those 20 calls with recorders on a perfect sales framework, right? So that you can have good training resources for great talent. And you can prove that it works. It's not just like, oh, it's founder-led sales. They're only buying because it's Addie's face or it's Dylan's face, right? If you're hiring for a delivery role, well, let's say you don't actually know how to run an ad account and you sell somebody on this idea that, okay, we're going to get you a 5x return on spend on your e-com store. It's like, okay, that's awesome. But what happens when you go and you white label that service? They shit the bed and you have no idea why. And you have to go back to your client and say, listen, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I was just white labeling. You should go work with that agency instead. And so the second level to that is that if you don't know what you're doing, no matter if it's in sales or delivery, whatever, you're going to end up becoming an employee of your employees. Right? And we all start business because we're lazy bastards as entrepreneurs and we don't want to be employees of anybody. So don't let yourself become an employee of your clients, but more importantly, don't let yourself become an employee of your employees by letting them run the show. You have to know what they're doing. You have to be able to call them out on their shit to be a proper leader, an effective leader. So at least know what you're doing first. So the simple 4 steps are do the unscalable first, then you simplify and remove process steps for yourself, right? So it's like, let's say I can set for 15 different clients right now on my own. How can we make this so I can do 30 or 40 of them on my own, right? But still get the same result, right? And then after that, then we delegate and then we automate because the automating is typically the place where things fall apart.
True. Yeah, there you go. And just going back to sales really quickly as well. One thing, like I brought this up before a few different times, but one thing that I've noticed, the way you manage sales, the way your sales skills are essentially one of those things that people often look at and they're just like mesmerized. You're constantly handling objections and how somebody should really go about doing certain things. And I always see that on the calls where that person just has a look on their face where they're like, fuck, how does this guy know this, right? So I want to understand a bit more about your sales because I know there's a lot of people out there that kind of teach sales on YouTube. And your approach I find quite different. So talk a bit more about that. How should someone get better at sales essentially?
By the standard definition, I suck at sales.
Why is that?
Well, I never took a classical sales training course, right? I never worked in an enterprise sales environment. I've never even been a closer or a setter in another offer that hasn't been my own, right? So experientially, going to look at guys like Bill Walsh or Cole Gordon, whatever you want to look at, they're probably much more experienced than I am from a sales perspective. I think the difference between what you get in their sales training online and why people resonate so much more with what we say here at Catalyst is because I just actually really give a fuck.
Yeah.
Like I give a fuck.
Yeah.
So much of a fuck, in fact, that I won't let you get off a call unless I know for a fact that you're leaving in a better position you came in and that the decisions you're making are the best decisions you can make for your business. And so because I care so much and also because I'm so bullish on what we do here, like our success rates are amazing from what I see. I read every single message that comes into our Slack and if 75 partners, we might only have 1 or 2 that aren't 100% satisfied. And even those guys aren't saying, fuck you, I'm taking you to court. It's just, hey man, like you fell short here. How can we mediate that, right? And so because I'm so confident in what we do and I give so much of a shit about the people we work with because of because of the reason of what we do and what I do every day, I want to change lives. It's really easy to overcome objections because you can just call people out for their shit. It's like, you don't want to think about it, right? It's okay, bro. You can just tell me you don't want to do it. You can tell me that you're afraid to take that next step. And if you want to take today, right, and let fear be the thing that holds you back again, that's totally fine. We're not ready to work together, right? But if you are willing to take that step, that's totally fine. Like, we're ready to fucking go. I'm not going to hold you back. I'm also not going to push you. But just know at the end of the day, you're the one who's holding yourself accountable for this, not me.
Yeah.
Right? When you can hold that kind of frame on a call and you just genuinely care, you can genuinely be skeptical, so it leaves no room for anybody else to be skeptical. And you can be so abundant that it forces everybody else in your presence to be scarce. You don't have to have sales training.
Yeah.
You just need to be a good person that enjoys having conversations and changing lives.
There you go. That's awesome. And talking about routine, you and Dylan are both very high performers running these, huge businesses. So I want to understand a bit more about your routine. I know you talk a bit more about how you both just have about 4 hours of deep work on your calendars. And aside from that, obviously managing everything else. How do you guys really go about doing that? How should someone structure their days and set themselves up for success?
Definitely 4 hours of deep work. That's a great thing that you mentioned there. Pay attention to the one thing that scares you most, because that's usually the one thing that's going to return 10 times for your business. So what's the one thing that you can spend 10% of your time on that will return 90% the results of what you could do for the entire day, right? Usually that thing will take you 20 minutes to an hour. Go record that YouTube video, go take that sales call, go do the follow-up, go have the hard conversation with your team member or one of your clients, like whatever it is, and just get it off your plate. So you can use an app like Rise, which is what Dylan and I use. It'll just kind of tell you, and I'm not sponsored by them at all. It'll just kind of tell you when you have your peak energy and your low energy.
How does it track it?
You just like an Oura ring.
Oh, I see.
Right? Or like a
okay.
Garmin.
Yeah.
And it'll just track your circadian rhythm and stuff like that. But basically, just trying to line your deep work with these 4 hour blocks. So you'll typically have like 2 points of higher energy in the day. Just do the hard work then, right? Block them off, no meetings at all. Turn your shit on Do Not Disturb and just get to work. Use Brain FM or listen to some house music or whatever. And then in the times when you're lower energy or you just really feel like you can't push to make it happen, get on the meetings, have conversations, right? Energize yourself with other people. But we're really at a point now where the 4 hours in the morning, I don't really need to do the things that I'm doing unless we're having a super big emergency in the business. I'm just doing the things that I know will return best because I'm scared of them. But these aren't things where it's like, oh, fuck, if I don't do this, we're not going to make the money anymore. But that happens because we took the time to consciously block this off and attack those things we're afraid of. 4 hours, and then obviously make some time to move your body, because if you want to move your mind, you have to start by moving your body. So do that every day. And then spend 1 or 2 hours a day doing the things that actually add energy to you outside of your work. Right? So learn a new skill, play guitar, go do Muay Thai, whatever. And obviously spend some time with family and people that matter.
Yeah, there you go. Love it. Talking about networking, over the past few months, I've heard a lot about your networking skills and how you're pretty well connected. And, whether it's networking with billionaires in different cities or just high profile, high value entrepreneurs. So talk a bit more about networking. I know I've asked this question to other people before, and the way they handle it has been quite different, because I know I've asked you this before too, so I know the answer. But for everybody listening, talk a bit more about networking. How should someone go about doing that?
Yeah, there's nothing really I hate more than that person that is just talking to you because they know who you are and they're trying to get in through the door. But there's also nothing I love more than somebody who's just genuinely curious.
Yeah.
So I spent my last $200 at a gym, Equinox, way back. It was like five plus years ago. And I was just looking to start fresh. I just dropped out of school. I quit my job. I had no real connections anymore. All my friends, I just said, listen, like, I'm gone for the next year. Forget about me for a little while. And so I was like, where's one place I can go that people who are like me or like the person I want to be are going to spend time? And I went to Equinox. And if you go look at the network that I have now, the people that I call my closest friends and my brothers, every single one of them is connected back to that gym in some way, shape, or form.
That's insane.
And so I think the easiest thing to do is just look for that one person that you can connect with, that you can be genuinely curious about, that reminds you of somebody who you want to be, and get to know them well. Because once you get in with them and you have a real relationship, they'll open the doors to everything else that you need, right? And just continue to be that person that's genuinely curious, that genuinely cares, because people who have made it, they don't have anything bad to say about people who are trying to get to where they are.
Yeah.
Maybe they will, depending on who they are, about people who are a little bit further ahead, right? But if they see that young, hungry kid, or even somebody who's in their 30s, 40s, 50s that's hungry and they're just trying to learn and make a change, they're more than willing to share what they have, right? Because it's all about giving back at that point. And what you give is what you get. So just leverage that and you'll probably be able to have a pretty crazy network.
That's awesome. And last question I have for you here, man. Looking back at everything you've done, you know, the wins, the losses, the lessons, if you could leave the audience with one piece of advice that could genuinely change their life or their business, what do you think that would be?
Know where you're going and take some time to recognize and understand the gift that you want to give the world and that you're here to give to the world, because you will very quickly realize that you'll find yourself purposeless and directionless if you don't. I'll leave it with one last story. We have a closer in one of our sales teams. Is awesome kid. He's in his 20s, dropped out of university, and he lives in Mexico. And he's making, this is his first 10K month, US. In Mexico, that's a lot of money. Like, you can do a lot with 10K in Mexico. And I got on my one-on-one with him yesterday, and I said, "Hi, man, how are you feeling?" He's like, "I feel weird, man." I'm like, "Why?" "Well, I'm doing everything I need to do. I'm making more money than I ever made before. I hit the goal that I've always wanted to hit, but I just feel kind of purposeless." He's like, I feel like I'm just kind of like drifting through life. How long's that been going on? I don't know, like 2 weeks. Okay. And 2 weeks ago, did you hit that goal? He's like, "I didn't, but I knew that I was going to this month." Okay. "And how long have you been trying to do that for?" "My entire life." Okay. The journey is a destination. And you can't have fun unless you're on some sort of journey. You can't feel fulfilled. You just hit your destination. You have nowhere else to go. There is no more journey for you. Right? And I'm like, you are a big fish in a small pond right now. Come out to Vancouver. I was at the gym yesterday. One of my close friends came out to me, dapped me up, and I said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing okay." "The fuck happened to you? Shit in your cornflakes." Right? And he's like, "I made $2.5 million today."
Yeah.
Like, why? Awesome, man. Why are you acting like that? And he's like, "I just want to do this. Like, I want to do this every month. Like, that's my goal for this year." Like, well, first month of the year, you made it happen. You're on track. Put a smile on that face. He's like, "Fucking right." Right? So I'm like, the problem that you face with your money is not going to change between 10K and $2.5 million. But I can tell you that all the character development and the journey that you go through between then and then, right? $10,000 a month and $2.5 million in a month is immense. And you're going to have so much fun in that process. So I'm like, change your environment, spend some time around some people that do things like that, and it will start to give you a bit of a new perspective.
Yeah.
But most importantly, you need to understand where you want to go and what you are here to give to the world
There you go.
first.
That's really good advice. I love
sure.
it. But that's all I have for you, man. Thanks once again for coming on. It was an amazing podcast. It's one of my best conversations I've definitely had. But make sure you guys check out Noah's channel. He's going to be dropping an insane amount of value on his YouTube this year. I think he was saying he's going to be dropping over 100 videos.
Yeah, you can reference and screen cap this video. I'll do 104 this year.
104. There you go. We're gonna do a podcast at the end of next year, and we're gonna make sure you did 104 there. But no, that's amazing. Make sure you guys get subscribed. Everything's gonna be linked below, all of his socials, and yeah, just make sure you guys keep following his content. But with that being said, I will see you guys in the next one.